So I'm gonna show you on how to cut out a pattern on a side window now. So we've got it clean, we're ready to cut some film, put it on there, and cut the pattern. This is one of the more difficult tasks to do in the window tinting process, so we're gonna practice a lot today and do this over and over and over again. I'm gonna show you two methods. I'm gonna show you my preferred method, which I think is the least riskiest method, and it's by using a marker to trace out the pattern. So the first thing that we wanna do is measure the window. So window tint comes in different sizes. It'll come in a 40-inch standard size. That's what I get a lot of because I use a plotter most of the time. But you can also get it in 20-inch, which is a 20-inch roll is great for side windows. So the first thing that we want to do is measure the biggest point, and right now we're at about 18 inches, so we know a 20-inch will cut our 40-inch roll in half, so we can use both sides of the film, and then lengthwise. And again, you want a couple inches on each side extra. So we're looking at 36 inches here. So what we're gonna do is cut a piece of film 20 inches by 36 inches in length. So I have a 40-inch roll right here. You can use a peel board or you can use a couple tables like this. I haven't had my peel boards put up yet, but I'm gonna put glass peel boards here, which is really nice to be able to put the film on and have it there. But you can also use a table like this too. So what we're gonna do is pull out our film and we can lay it on the table here. And what I'm gonna do is find the center point. So this is a 40-inch roll. So I'm just gonna mark off where 20 is. I'm gonna cut right down there. And then I'm gonna measure out 36. This is the film. So I'm gonna show you the layers of the film. So we have two layers on this. We have the actual film adhesive, and then we have the backing that covers the adhesive. So the only good way to get this separated is usually using your teeth. And sometimes it takes a little bit, but you can see that we have two different layers here. So we have our actual tint layer, and we have our backing layer. And this is the part that we're gonna pull off, and the adhesive is gonna go to the inside of the window. So when we are forming the window tint, we want the backing layer facing out. So imagine the inside of the window and the adhesive going on the inside. So when we shape this pattern, we're gonna make sure that our adhesive or our backing layer is face out. And this is the layer that we can hard card on, where we don't have to risk putting any scratches or anything on the inside, because this is gonna be the inside of the window, right? So the first thing that we do when we have our tint is we're gonna put that outside backing layer facing out. So we're gonna walk over here very slow and make sure that we don't crease the window film while we're getting it over here. We find out where our backing layer is. So that's our backing layer, adhesive side out. So that backing layer is going to sit right on the window like so. In order to get it to stick, so we're gonna put a small layer of our solution on there, and then we can lay our piece of film on there. The solution is gonna help us move around this film and get it positioned to where we can actually cut out the template for this window. So I'll put a little solution behind there, put some more solution behind here. And now we can kind of adjust this and move it around a little bit as we need to cut this out. So the first step after we lay the film on is going to line up the bottom here. So this is our bottom factory edge. So we have two factory edges. It'll be up that one there. This is the part that we cut. So I put the bottom piece, the bottom edge, which is the factory cut edge, on the bottom. And now what we're gonna do is we're simply going to pull this down, because we need a little extra on each side of the film so we don't have any light gaps. So I use my trim here, and what I'm going for is about a little more than 1/4 inch of extra that's gonna be tucked down into the seal. If we are too short, we could end up with that piece of film hitting that seal every time the window goes up and down, and it could eventually start to peel. If we have too much down here, it makes installing it more difficult because we have extra film. So we want to kind of be right in the middle there, where we have about 1/4 inch extra on there, and we want to make sure that we're covering both ends. We have enough film covering that side and that side. Now, once that is done, we want to kind of secure this in place. So what I do is I use my squeegee. I'm gonna put one down there. So now this is pretty secure. It's not gonna move. So we don't want this to move as we're cutting this for the template. So the safest way to do this is to not cut on the car. I'm actually gonna use a marker. So what we do is I'll start on this side. I'm gonna push my film onto there, and you don't wanna press it too hard because you don't wanna crease the film. But what I'm gonna do is use my fingers to press it in there, and then I use my marker to kind of mark where that edge is. I'm gonna do the same thing on this side. So now when I transfer that to my table or my peel board, I know that I can cut, about 1/8 to 1/4 inch outside there, usually about 1/8 on the sides, just a little bit of extra so that film can sit inside. So that's my two sides. I know exactly where to cut. Now we have to cut the top, and this is usually the most challenging thing that we're gonna practice a lot today. Sometimes this extra piece of film will get in the way. You can pull it away from the car and cut off that top, because if we open the door, sometimes it can get stuck on that A-pillar. So what we need to do is we need to open this door, and what we're gonna do is cut the top edge here. So with the car on, we're going to peel this up just a little bit, and we're going to roll the window down just a little bit so you can see we have access to that top edge. I'll spray a little bit of solution on there, and we'll do this several times. So now we have that top edge, and we're gonna cut it with our knife. So basically what we're gonna be doing, if you see this knife, it has a little bit of a shelf on the edge there, right? So that edge right there, we're gonna put our knife out just a little bit. You can kind of see that. That's what I'm gonna put on top here, and I'm gonna gently set my knife on top of that edge, and I'm gonna use that to guide the actual top cut. Now, some things that could happen if you use this edge and you're pressing too hard, you can actually indent the film there. So you wanna set this top of the razor blade right on top of the window and gently push in till you feel this touch the actual window. This takes some practice, and we can practice this over and over. This is probably the most difficult part when you're cutting out this window, because you want to do it in one big, even sweep, right? So how we start is we have our blade out. I usually just have it 1 or 2 clicks out. And we start here, and we want this perfectly flat as much as possible. We're gonna come to the top of our window, and we'll pull that all the way to the edge. Like so. That is the top cut. On the edges here, what you do is you lift this up and you pull up, and you can just tear that piece of film away. Same thing on this side. You can tear that piece of film away. So now we have to cut out our excess on there. So now what we can do is transfer this to our peel board or to our table, and then we can cut out the rest of this, and I'll show you how to do that. So we have our pattern, we have our lines here that we mark the outside of it, and we have our bottom here. First thing I like to do is the top. I take my triangle and I come to the top, and I get right to that edge, and I finish it off by cutting that. And then I'll measure right here. Remember, we want to go to the outside, about 1/8 of an inch. Cut that. And then if you feel comfortable, go all the way down. I'm gonna round this edge, this corner here. So what I do is I usually take my fingernail, and we don't want to point there because that is a point that could actually start to end up peeling. So what I do is I put my finger right there, and I end up just cutting a nice little round part there. We'll do the same thing on the other side here. I'll use my straight edge, and I'll put it right to the edge, making sure I can continue that cut on the top. And then I'll come right on the outside here. And I'll round my corners. And that is our pattern. So we have our top edge and our sides, and that is our pattern for cutting out the window. I do want to show you the other way of cutting out the window, doing it on the glass, which is not my preferred method, but I want to show you all options that you have and at least give you the points and the tricks and the pointers. If you're going to do it this method, I want to show you the proper way instead of you just jumping into it. So normally, you know, I have this kind of dilemma sometimes of like, hey, I want to show you the right way to do it, or my opinion is that I think everybody should do it, but there are different ways of doing things. And that's important too. I'm going to show you what I do to do window tint in my method. There are other ways and different methods and different ways people do things, so just know that as well too. So we can use this. This is a good pattern. We'll set it over here for right now. I'm gonna cut out another piece and I'll show you again, but I'll show you how to cut on the car. All right, liner facing me. All right, what's my first step? Line up the bottom. So we're gonna line up the bottom first with that factory edge. Factory edge is down. All right, so I have about a 1/4 inch extra on the bottom there. Next step, tack it. Yep, we're gonna tack it. So we'll tack it right in the middle there. Now it doesn't move. Now I'm gonna show you how to cut on the actual window. So most important thing on cutting on a window is making sure that you always have a nice, clean, sharp blade. What happens if you have a dull blade, you end up pressing harder, and that's where you end up etching or cutting the glass. So we wanna have a clean blade every single time. So you'll put the blade in the back, I put it up one, you put it in there, and you snap it back. You have a nice, clean blade. All right, on our edges, what we would normally do is use that marker, right? But what I'm gonna do over here is I'm actually gonna cut it now. And I'm gonna put out the blade just a tiny bit. And the same thing with the marker, I'm gonna use my blade and I'm gonna cut. So the risk that you have is these seals, right? If I cut this, if I have the wrong angle, come in closer. So when I'm cutting, I have all these different angles that I can use when I'm cutting. So if I'm cutting in, I can start cutting that seal. So when I'm cutting and I'm pressing the film against here, when I'm pressing that film against there, I want to make sure I'm facing out and I'm not cutting into the seal. So when I put this piece of film there, just have a little bit out, and I use my fingers to guide. So I'll use my bottom finger to keep that window tint into that seal. And I'll put it in there and I'll let that seal guide, but I'm not cutting into the seal. And then you see I have my film cut, but I did not cut into that seal. So that's the only thing that we have to be aware of when we're cutting and we have these rubber seals. They're very, very, very thin and you can cut them very easily. So what we're gonna do is do the same thing over here. And I don't have to go all the way to the bottom or all the way to the top. I can use my straight edge to cut the rest of it. I need that main angle though. So I'll come in here. This one doesn't have a seal when you look at it. So I can kind of cut into it. I peel away that extra. Now, we don't have the luxury of cutting extra film, so what we need to do here is we actually need to shift the film over a little bit. Another reason why I like just using a marker, because then I can just know that I can cut outside the marker a little bit. So what we're gonna do is I'm going to get that wet behind there and I pull it so I have a little extra on that side. Make sure my bottom is still lined up correctly. So I have a little extra that's gonna be tucking into the window. And now with my knife, I'm gonna snap it. So I have a brand new sharp edge. Every time you cut, just snap it. And then the same thing here. You can see I kind of, see how it's going. I don't need to go to the very top, I just need to get most of it. One blade out. And then peel it back. Cut off this extra. Now we have to pull it back. So we have a little bit of extra there and a little bit of extra here. So we split that difference so we don't have any light gaps. So we have a little bit of extra that's covering the seal there. I got my bottom. I got a little bit of extra that's gonna go into the seal there. And then we're gonna tack it again. Open the door, very important. Lift this bottom edge up just a little bit so it doesn't get tucked. Roll it down till we have that top edge. Again, I like to use my squeegee here just so that top edge is nice and flat against that top. Start on the edge here, let it rest right on the top. We want to move with the film. Top edge is cut, like so. Now, a lot of guys doing hand cutting like this will end up just trimming right on the window. So what we do is we put our film up like that, and now we have these edges here, right? So I'm gonna get a new blade because this one's almost out, and then I'm gonna show you how to trim it. So with my straight edge right on the window, again, I have a nice sharp blade. Use that straight edge to cut that. Cut the other side. Snap my blade. Now I can round the corners here. Top edge. Side. Just keep snapping that blade. Last piece. And now we have our pattern. It gets difficult. This is where the frustration kind of sets in, you know, so we're gonna practice most of the day cutting these patterns. I'm gonna show you right now how to install it just so we can have it for video and everything, but then we're gonna practice and we're gonna get film. You're gonna come over here and you're gonna practice cutting out the pattern. And then tomorrow when I show you the plotter, you're gonna be like, that is so much easier. All right, now I'm gonna show you how to top load install. So we have our pattern here, we cut it out. The first step to this is to actually shrink the bottom so we don't have any fingers. So the way that I'm gonna put this film on the pattern, I'm gonna put the film on the pattern here. I'm gonna set it directly on the window and I'm gonna have some overhang on this side. I'm all right with that. You'll notice I have a little bit of a gap down here. That's intended. So you can see I have extra film up here. I have some extra film up here. I got a finger popping up there. So now what I need to do is I need to get this ready. And what I want to do is get all the extra film on the bottom here. And that's where we're going to shrink it. So what I like to do is pull this window tint up just a little bit and make sure all my extra film is down there. And I do it like a U-shaped rainbow, right? I'll do my other side. You see I have extra film there. I pull it and I get all that extra in this area here. So now you can see I have some extra film there. We're gonna grab the heat gun. Heat gun is a tool, but it can also cause damage. So make sure you know where your end is always pointing. Never use the heat gun on the inside of the car. We wanna make sure that we shrink the window perfectly now so we don't have to have any fingers after we install it. So just be aware of this rubber down here. You don't wanna put too much heat there. I like to, you know, have my heat all the way up. Turn it on, make sure it's heating. You never want to heat any of the edges. So the edges can actually start curling in if you have too much heat there. So like that right there, keep the heat away from there. I always, when I have my gun, I'm always pointed away from the car. It's easy to kind of like, you know, as I'm heating and forget about it and have the heat gun pointing to the car where it can cause damage. Be aware that there's rubber over here, you know, so just be aware where it's always pointing. Just want to point it away from anything when you're not using it. So what we're doing is I have my extra film there, and what we're going to do is we're going to start to shrink it. You can kind of see it go up a little bit, right? As we're shrinking, we can press this down. And we want to be careful. We have too much film there. This is not a bad shrink. This is a pretty flat window, so it's not too bad. And what we're looking for is this film to be perfectly flat on the bottom. If this film is perfectly flat, we know when we install it, we're not going to have any fingers pop up. So I like to do a secondary one. So I'll lift this up just a little bit. And what I did is I have air in between there now, right? You see that I have air in there? I'm just gonna do a little bit of an extra shrink and hit that down. So now I know that that bottom is shrunk. I'm not gonna have any fingers pop up. All right, time to install. So my 3 tools that I'm gonna use is the squeegee, the conquistador, and this platinum easy reach. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna set up the tint to be able to peel it. So if you have a peel board, you can put this on the peel board. I'm gonna put it on the actual window right now. And now that water there kind of makes it stuck, you can tack it down. I like to clean the top really well because I don't want anything running down into the film. So this is my final clean. I'll make sure that's really clean there. I'm gonna clean the inside of the window one more time. So give this a few pumps and I'm gonna do a nice even layer on there. I start at the top, pull this all the way to the edge. Now what I'm gonna do is get a nice even layer on there. And I wanna do this rather quickly, the quicker the better. I'm gonna blast out my edges. And I want to put a nice even layer of my soap solution on there. Now I'm going to pull back my liner. So I have to use my fingernail usually here. And what we're doing is just pulling back that liner. So when I pull that liner back, I'm keeping it close to the window. If I start pulling it out, I can pull the entire piece of film off. So what I'm going to do is keep that close to the window. And doing a top load, what I do is I want to keep some of that liner on there. So I keep 1 to 2 inches on the bottom there. And what I'm gonna do is, again, spray a nice layer of this soap solution on the film. And now I'm ready to transfer this film on the inside of the window. A couple things when we're doing it. Anytime we touch this, we could introduce dirt or debris into the window. I'm talking now, but we wanna do this quickly. As quick as we can to transfer it, because now that the adhesive is exposed, anything that falls from the ceiling or anything could potentially get in there. So what I do is I take the back of my fingernail and I come and use the back of my fingernail and I press it on the side there and I get my hand in there and I'm going to do this slower and I lift it up like that. And now when I come back here, I'm going to sit down. I get to where my liner is, and I'm gonna slowly push this up. So I get this to where I want it, and I get it in there, and I'm gonna do my top edge first. So that's my top. I'm gonna get my top lined up. I get it to where the top edge just has a small little gap at the top, an 1/8 of an inch or smaller. If you go over the top edge here, if you feel it, the film, it could end up peeling back in the future. So by having that 1/8 inch little gap there, you don't have to worry about that peeling in the future. So when I feel like I got it to where I want it on the top edge, I actually come out here and I make sure both sides are covered. I don't want any light gaps on each side, right? So I make sure my film is perfectly aligned on both the sides. So now what I have is my film exactly where I want it. I put some lubrication, that's your soap there, and I usually use my thumb and my finger and I do a light squeegee right on the top. That's the first step. You can kind of see it moves a little bit, especially if we have too much soap or the window is slippery. So as you're squeegeeing out the film, you kind of want to make sure everything still stays in the right spot. So you just do a light squeegee at first. I'll do another spray. And as I can continue to do this, I'm gonna get a little more aggressive with the squeegee to really squeegee out any of that soap in that water. And this is where you can figure out, maybe I have too much soap, maybe I don't have enough soap. On the top edge. So now, we need to make sure our corners are pressed down because my squeegee isn't gonna get all the way to this corner. So now I can either use this conquistador or this card to get that corner all the way squeezed out. And sometimes that conquistador doesn't fit in real well. So I have to use this one and I'll press it right against the window and I'll push it right into that corner, getting all that moisture or soap out. Sometimes I'll use this just to hit the top edge like that, just to make it a little tighter, and I'll get all the way to the edge there too. So you can see we might have just a little too much soap in there. If it's kind of shifting a little bit, you can go ahead and use your heat gun and heat the outside. And what we're doing is just trying to dry that top end, that top edge, to get it to tack. So we may just have just a little too much soap in this solution. We'll scale it back just a little bit, but I'm gonna heat that top edge so it doesn't move. We're in a pretty good position now. This is the scary part. Now that you have your top secure, we're going to raise the window up. So I always kind of like to put my hand here, make sure my edges aren't anywhere to where they're gonna get damaged, and we put the top up. So now this is the most difficult part of installing, is we have to get all this extra film inside here. And you can see we have the top of the door panel, we have the seals that are all kind of in the way. And we gotta tuck it in there without damaging the film. This is a real piece of, it's a thin piece of film, so we don't wanna crease it in any way. So what we're gonna do is we're slowly going to, I put my hand there just so I don't pull the window tint off the car. And this is why we wanna make sure everything is clean. We pull that up. And I wanna flush out this bottom a little bit. So what I do is I pull this up and I'm gonna flush out that bottom, just in case there's anything there. And now this is lubricated too. So what we try to do here is we wanna get this in the corner and press it down. So I use my tool to pull back the seal a little bit, and I get that corner in. So while I'm putting that corner in, you see this little bubble? I like that little bubble there. So what we do is push this up again, and I have this little bubble right there. That's perfectly fine. I come in here and I pull this out just a little bit so I can get behind that seal. As soon as I'm in the seal, I can start pressing it back in. And now we have this extra that we need to get in. So I use my bubble there to kind of press this in. And while working it, I slowly press down, watching the edges, getting that inside. And now I'll slowly work that air. You can kind of see how I just worked it down past that seal, and now everything is tucked in. Once you're tucked in, just like the top, I start at the top, I work my way over. You'll work out all this extra air in the solution as we go. So that's one, that's my light one. I'll come a little more with some little more pressure to really make sure I don't leave any water or soap behind. And now I have to get my edges. So now what I do is use my squeegee part and I get all these edges. And here, I stick my card in here, I pull back just a little bit so I can get my squeegee in there. And now I pull this all the way across and I'm getting all that water and everything out of the bottom. Kind of wiping as we go. So I'll do one last squeegee. This is my third time. This is where I put the most pressure and I'm just really making sure I got all the air, all the soap and water out. Hit all my edges one more time with the bottom. I'm kind of pulling it in and out. To get that, I come over here, get my edge and pull it through. And now I can use my towel to clean everything. And I want to make sure everything is clean. Up here we got a little bit of a crease. You press that down. And you want to check your corners and your edges and make sure that you've gotten everything out and that it's nice and clean. At this point, if you see something that's glaring, you know, usually you'll see one or two specks in there. It's pretty normal. It's hard to get a perfectly clean window tint, but if you find a hair or a bunch of specks in one spot, you'll probably want to redo it. If there's any light gaps or anything like that, but that's the install part. You might see some moisture in there, right? So you might see even like some of the marks, especially when you take it outside, some of the squeegee marks. You'll see moisture in there for, 6 to 12 hours. If it's inside, if you take it outside, it can go away in a couple hours with the sun. If it's hot out to dry up that moisture. But yeah, if you see any moisture in there, you're usually, that'll all dry out. If you see any air you want to be able to push out. So that's why we check our edges and check everything. If there's any extra air, which is usually going to be white, it'll look a little clearer and you'll see that. There's a difference between an air bubble and a moisture bubble. Moisture bubble, you'll see that there's just water in there and they're harder to see, but if there's air in it, you'll see the little pocket of air and you want to make sure that you squeegee that out to an exit. So that's the top loading method. We're going to work on that today. I will show you the bottom loading method. It does require taking the door panel off, removing the seal. It can be a little bit easier on some cars that have bigger seals or really tight seals on the bottom. Some of the cars actually have double seals on the bottom of the sweep. So that bottom is called a sweep. Some of them have just one kind of squeegee to hold that window in and make sure nothing gets down there. Some of them have actual double squeegees in there. So you have to make sure the tint is past that second one. And sometimes that's hard when the seal is actually in. So taking it out, it's a lot easier to get down there and get that film flat on the very bottom of the window there.